So here what I'm seeing is there's a lot of innovation and then there's a lot of work to get that to work. Fashion is, for me, one of the best parallels because you have the issue with hand feel. So people had to get comfortable understanding how fabric felt before they could buy online. And that shifted now, and now there's complete comfort, and there's a massive shift in the industry towards it. I do think one of the barriers for grocery is always going to be trust of somebody else picking your produce.
It's true.
And then how much good produce is out there and what's left in the store after.
Yeah. All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Digital Grocer, Mercatus' very own podcast.
Yep.
And we're live here in Las Vegas at the Groceryshop 2019 event, day number 2.
Yes.
It was a whirlwind day yesterday, right, guys?
It was. So joining us is Rob Sanchez.
Yes.
Rob,
Hey, how's it going?
explain to the audience who you are and what you do.
For sure. So I'm the CEO of Mouthmedia Network. We've been working on the podcast with these fine gentlemen here for a while now. We cover a lot of different industries, and grocery is sort of our focus right now.
Yeah.
It's blowing up in a way that fashion was 11 years ago.
Yeah.
So it has that same excitement and drive, and it's a good moment.
Well, and it was interesting because, as probably our audience knows, we were producing the show out of our office in Toronto.
Yep.
And it becomes such a heavy lift. We wanted to make sure that we were doing it well and continuing to do it well. And the opportunity came to work with Mouthmedia, and we jumped at it. And I think it's been work. This is our third, fourth show already.
I think so, yeah. Well, when we started the podcast, it was just like, at the bar at the end of one day by the office, say, hey, I think we should do this, and let's buy some equipment and let's see it works. Then you suddenly realize you have to prep for the shows, you have to get your guests, and there's the audio editing, which we know nothing about. I think we were lucky just to figure out how to connect the telephone line to a board and something. What's a telephone line?
Yeah.
Why don't you use the internet for that?
Yeah. And it's great because I know our audience, I know the industry is consuming podcasts. I know there's other organizations out there in our space that all of a sudden are starting up their podcasts.
Well, I think everything we do from a marketing perspective, we're probably the template to a lot of their competitors as well as some of the other smaller players in the industry. If we do some sort of trade publication with some really good type of story on the operationalization of something, I know there's someone's going to follow with some similar story. I mean, it's the story of our lives, right, in terms of what we do.
Yeah, well, as they say, what it is, imitation is the sincerest form of flattery.
Yep.
Absolutely. So what's going on the trade show floor, Mark? Like yesterday, you walked around. Did you see anything that kind of hit you?
Well, I'm looking at the Takeoff Technologies booth right now. It's quite impressive. They're demoing their robotic picking capabilities. I know we have friends over there in the Miracle booth showcasing their marketplace tech. There's some big players here. Microsoft's booth is over yonder.
Over yonder. That's a unit of measure. But I didn't go to the Microsoft. What are they showcasing? Do you know?
Off the top of my head, no. But
Okay.
they're here, which is, I guess, significant.
Well, they have to have a presence in retail. I remember the day when Microsoft had an ad network. And this was years ago. They did that partnership with a couple of agencies out of Chicago and New York, and it unfortunately didn't really go anywhere. But I think they're trying to be active in retail. I'm surprised Oracle's not here.
Yeah,
Actually.
They're not walking the show, are they?
I know Pinterest was here last year.
Yes, they're not here this year.
Not here this year.
Yeah. It's an interesting show. I think there's traffic-wise, gut feel, it feels less people.
I think the exhibit space, it feels smaller. We're positioned right beside the general session. So we know there's bodies, but as soon as the general session ends, they have other places to go. And it's that from that perspective, it's although we're having good traffic based on our booth position.
Yes.
Looking forward to day 2. See if we get more conversations going.
And are you getting feedback on the content?
The content-wise, there's nothing new. It seems to be a rinse and repeat from last year.
Yeah.
And a lot of the same speakers.
Yeah, my sense from talking to some people is the content, I don't want to say the word dated. Like I think there's this appetite in the industry to say, well, content should be, something needs to be new and innovative every 3 to 4 or 5 months, right? I think it's probably in the cycle of every time Apple releases a new phone, there should be new content in this space. But the reality is this space doesn't grow by leaps and bounds on a quarterly basis. So I think there's some rehashing of some content. I heard Walmart spoke yesterday. P&G had a good presentation. So there's been some okay pockets of content. But I would agree, generally the feedback I'm getting is that it feels kind of rehashed.
Yeah.
Right. The data.
Yeah, it does remind me a lot of the early days in fashion tech, where there would be like a big spike, and then everyone would talk about that for like 2 years. And then it would happen again.
Right.
And it would happen again. And then this beat started picking up.
Okay.
So here what I'm seeing is there's a lot of innovation, and then there's a lot of work to get that to work.
Right.
And then it happens again. And so you kind of have these boom and bust cycles on new conversations.
Oh, that's interesting. That's probably in line with a cycle of innovation, which is, every 2 years, time to absorb it, time to make it better, mature, kind of go to the next level. I think it's kind of familiar to what we're hearing in this space as well, in this vertical, Mark.
Yeah, and it's, as you said, you had the big announcement 2 years ago, Amazon Whole Foods, and that's still working its way through the industry. There will be another shoe that drops.
Right.
Yeah.
We just don't know what it is and when it will be.
Yeah.
And that'll kick off another dialogue or conversation spike that Rob was talking about.
Well, I heard yesterday from talking to some smaller retailers, and then we're talking about these are retailers with below 20 locations. They are having similar conversations in their boardrooms that some extremely large retailers are talking about owning their customers, about being, as per our campaign, back in charge.
Right.
So these smaller retailers are starting to have those conversations, and that becomes extremely grassroots in terms of the level it's happening. And there's some interesting fear out there that maybe they gave up too much.
Yeah.
And they're starting to kind of think about it.
Well, it's interesting that you say that. I think the fact that what's informed our positioning in the market now is the conversations that you've had over the last little while with our clients and prospective clients and what their objectives are in really owning their grocery shopping experience online.
Yeah. We also had some CPGs visit us yesterday.
Interesting.
And, we've always talked about at some point the CPGs are going to consider how do they go direct. And then I think most of them are reluctant to spread themselves thin across the multiple channels, whether it be Amazon and so on and so on. But the one conversation we had yesterday that struck me as being really interesting is wanting to partner in terms of being able to influence what's happening on a .com perspective across multiple retailers. And I'm not talking about advertising.
Right.
No, that's not the conversation.
Yeah.
It's about product placement, product bundles, product influence in the consumer, and educating the consumer in a way that it's easier to get educated consumer online than it is in store, but it's so infrequently done well.
Right.
Yesterday I was doing an interview with I don't know if you know this. I don't even know if we organized this interview, but it was a very small newspaper in the Midwest.
Was that produce retailer?
Yeah.
Yes.
Was that organized by us?
Yes.
Yeah, she was a lovely person to talk to, and she had some amazing questions.
Yeah.
And she talked about, like, when you're in the category of produce, what are the barriers to adoption of buying produce online, blah, 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 blah. Fast forward, her core question is, how do you educate consumers on produce? And this goes back to that CPG conversation. I'm like, buying produce on a good day is intimidating. And it's usually the most expensive part of your grocery shop. So how do you pick an avocado? How do you teach someone to do that? What to do with the avocado? What's the health benefits of it?
Right.
Because we stick to the staples as human beings, right? Lettuce, carrots, celery, onions, peppers, and radicchio, some of the other stuff. You're kind of like, how do you find that in a grocery store, right?
I need kumquats for this recipe.
And you're like, and you have to Google it, right? You're like, what is this stuff?
Yeah. Are they supposed to be green?
And you don't know, right? And suddenly you eat them and you get sick because you're supposed to wait for them to be ripe.
Right.
Yeah.
So we try to educate, explaining to her that's the big thing. And that theme across the CPGs that visited our booth was consistent, which was really interesting.
Did you see that in other industries as well?
Well, so again, fashion is, for me, one of the best parallels because you have the issue with hand feel. So people had to get comfortable understanding how fabric felt before they could buy online. And that's shifted now, and now there's complete comfort, and there's a massive shift in the industry towards it. I do think one of the barriers for grocery is always going to be trust of somebody else picking your produce.
It's true.
And then how much good produce is out there and what's left in the store after.
Yeah.
And then, I don't know, have you seen Misfits?
No.
They have a pretty brilliant marketing campaign at the New York subway right now, but it's a marketplace for all of the produce that looks weird.
Oh, wicked.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense.
And you know it's going to show up ugly.
Oh yeah, yeah.
So
and then that's part of the
your,
fun.
your expectations are being managed.
Let me deal with your expectations.
Yeah.
Right.
So I like that idea too, because they're basically saying, okay, the food is still good, but it's going to be mismatched on the way it's presented, and that fixes some of that, and also gives the stores an offshoot for it.
Yeah.
Deals a little bit with food waste, but yeah, it's fascinating.
What's interesting, you talk about the fabric, because yesterday I was having a pretty in-depth conversation with an individual that suggested, well, I think there's imaging technology that can be used to pick the right piece of produce or steak, and it could be easily implemented in store. And being a technologist, I said, that's a solution looking for a problem.
Yeah.
And no, the individual did not respond well to my comment.
Yeah.
And I suspect it's because he's made a heavy investment in that technology.
Yep.
I tried to explain to him, I said, number one, technology doesn't solve everything.
Yeah.
Two, at the end of the day, deploying technology in retail at 3% margin is difficult on a good day.
Yep.
And, high turnover rate. And also we know from experience that when we're writing user guides or we're writing training material for inside the store, it's got to be really, really easy so the adoption rate can be really quick. It can't be overly complicated. And quite frankly, if it's too much to support, it loses traction really quick.
Yeah.
But I kind of wrapped up my conversation, and this individual cut off our conversation because, again, I wasn't supporting his idea.
Yeah.
I said to him, I said, what's really important to understand at the end of the day when you're dealing with in grocery retail, that no matter what you build, if the input in terms of quality of meat and produce, if that input into the supply chain is already not good, so if half the stuff you're buying is already spoiled, I don't care what technology you're going to put in.
Yeah.
It's not going to solve the problem.
That's why I think the further back in the supply chain you tackle the margin issue, the better.
100%.
In the same way that one of the reasons that margins were crap in the fashion industry was because the supply chain was archaic, and you had to order like a year, 18 months and longer in advance. So you never actually knew. So they actually just built in spoilage. And there was this big, like, the idea that they're burning clothes, there was this big kerfluffle about that, but that's actually common industry practice.
Wow.
To decrease the prices. You have a similar issue if you're not handling the agriculture correctly, if you're not dealing with the soil and the light for the crops, if you're not handling pesticides and so on. And it's going to be interesting. One of the things I'm fascinated with right now is the impact of the lawsuits against Roundup.
Roundup Monsanto.
Yeah. It's going to be interesting to see that ripple through, because that's going to have a huge downstream impact, especially since most of our crops now have been genetically modified to support that.
Yeah.
So I think that's a place to take that innovation and move it, like deal with that at the
farm level,
picking, at the farm level.
Yeah.
What becomes compost? What do you ship?
Yeah.
Versus in the store.
There's some interesting statistics that say, I think in the United States, I think it's over 30% of the food is wasted on an annual basis.
Yeah.
It's ridiculous.
Yeah.
When you think about it,
And you think the cost is baked into what consumers pay now.
Yep.
And
That's your margin.
Yeah, and to your point, if you're able to better operationalize and rationalize your costs from the source, and that's the challenge that you have with some of the innovators in the grocery space, is that they're setting up distribution centers or dark stores that sort of bypass the traditional grocery supply chain.
Right.
And they're able to either lower the cost or they're going to pocket that margin to their benefit.
Yeah.
And the typical grocery retailer is going to continue to be hamstrung.
Yeah, I think it's like yesterday I made a prediction. Like, if I was Albertsons, I think Albertsons is an unsung hero in this space. No one talks about them necessarily, but they're very covert as an organization, and I understand that with what they're doing. But if I was to reinvent myself as a grocery retailer, I would move. If you could move the majority of your commodities to an online sale.
Yeah.
Right. So your detergents, your toilet paper, all your cleaning supplies. I mean, you can go through the list, your pet foods and everything, right? Your canned goods. And then everything else, then you end up with smaller stores that are dealing with the items that are more susceptible to shrink, right? So your prepared foods, your fruits, your vegetables, your meats. The margins a retailer would save would be huge. It's the cost. And then on labor, store development, and so on. Then you could shipping and stocking. Then you could do something super innovative with the brand and really differentiate yourself out there in the market.
Well, that's a Wegmans, right?
That's a Wegmans, but Wegmans still deals with those extremely large stores that they have, right?
Yeah.
You know,
But their experiences and their
experience is
restaurants,
amazing,
yeah.
right? Even you go, I think one of the Wegmans I went to in Rochester had 75 different cheeses. I was like, this is like dying and going to heaven
Yeah.
without a cardiologist next to you, right? I'm surprised, and you know, the only vendor that's on the floor, I think yesterday and today, that's talking about supply chain and food tracking is IBM. IBM's here, which I nearly tripped in front of the booth. I mean, where have you guys been for the last 25 years?
Yeah.
Right, that's pretty insane.
Avery's doing some stuff with supply chain on the using barcodes and RFID to decrease shrinkage in the actual prepared foods.
Oh, I didn't know that. That's
yeah.
amazing.
So that's one of the innovations that they're discussing over there.
Wow.
But yeah, it's pretty interesting.
So I'm excited. Today we have, I think we're recording 3 more podcasts. Is it 3?
Yeah, 3. I know we have one at the end of the day.
Yeah.
And
We have Fit for Commerce.
Fit for Commerce at a little later this afternoon. Yeah.
And then we have the boys from Radius Networks.
And Shopper Kit.
Shopper Kit. And
Yeah.
we're excited to work with those guys. They have some amazing tech that just blows my mind.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know.
And they're good partners of ours.
They're great partners. They're amazing.
So we're looking forward to it.
So, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for listening to this episode, and stay tuned to download the next one. Again, straight from the trade show floor here at Groceryshop 2019. Rob, thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, it was a pleasure.
And Mark,
Yes,
how do
sir.
people get a hold of us?
www.mercatus.com.
Awesome. Thanks, guys.
Bye-bye.